WNST Super Bowl is over. No one more happy than Luke Jones, who got to escape me and all of the beer and barbecue down in Houston, Texas. We were together all last week making some radio. I hope you guys enjoyed that. If you missed any of it, you can check it out in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault, as well as all the videos, all the live streams, all that stuff up at YouTube and on our Facebook Live. And Luke, we get back just in time for, pitchers and catchers reporting, Orioles dumpster diving, Terps getting into the meat of it, and even a huge LeBron James visit on Monday night. I think that caught the attention of lots of sports fans locally in that Wizards loss.
Yeah, it really did. I mean, I even tweeted about it a little bit. I'm not an NBA fan in the regular season all that much, but really entertaining game. Just because we put football season in the rearview mirror, even though we really won't. We'll be in Indy at the end of the month. Combine will get cranked up. Free agency will be soon to follow. So NFL never really goes away, but at least the on-field action now in the rearview mirror. But plenty going on. Orioles pitchers and catchers report in about a week. And certainly the Terps.
Man, that sounds weird. In about a week. Wow.
Yeah, a little bit earlier this year, a World Baseball Classic, which we'll talk a little bit about that. I mean, I love the idea, the execution, and the reality of it. I'm not a big fan of. I know Buck Showalter's not a big fan of, but yeah, we're right around the corner. Be talking baseball, and we'll certainly have plenty to talk about there. But in the meantime, Terps. Saturday's loss notwithstanding, still a lot to like about this team, and an opportunity to get back on track, playing on the road here. Some big road games coming up here over the next couple weeks, but Terps trying to bounce back from their third loss of the season.
Look, you were down there Saturday. You got back late on Friday night from Houston. I watched the game, and it was nice last week. Both Terps games were on in my hotel room. Not that I can't, surf out and do all the ESPNU and the ESPN 3s and all that stuff and the Big Tent Network and wherever it might be. But it is heartening to know that down in Houston in my hotel room, the Terps were on both times. I got a chance to watch them play. Quite frankly, I was really late getting to Lee Steinberg's party on Saturday because the Terps really sucked me in on Saturday. That was an exciting honorable kind of basketball game there for the middle of the season. That's about as good as it gets. I know you were down there in the middle of it. It looked like the joint was rocking, man.
Oh, it was a terrific atmosphere. There's no doubt about it. I mean, as much as you and I had a chance to see a game at Purdue, Terps going there last year, was fun to see the Boilermakers come in. And, it was a disappointing loss. Maryland had the 12-point lead in the second half. I mean, there are certainly things that they could have done better. They went the final 7.5 minutes without scoring a field goal, even though that they were terrific getting to the line and making free throws. But when you're counting on free throws for that long of a stretch at the very end of the game, it's just very, very difficult to win. They needed to make a couple more shots. I mean, it sounds so simplistic, but that's really what it came down to. And on the flip side, even though he did end up fouling out, it was just a little too much Caleb Swanigan, who is probably the best player in the Big Ten, has been terrific. I thought Maryland's bigs did a respectable job making him work, but he was just a little bit too much to handle. He's the best player on the floor on Saturday.
By the way, it was an epic foul out, too. That was fantastic.
Yeah. But this was just it was disappointing from the standpoint that this was Maryland's first real test against a ranked opponent to kind of show, okay, at this point, we know the Terps are good. Even with the loss, they're 20-3. They're good, but there's still a lot of question as far as how good they are. Are they a team that's really a top 15 kind of team, or a little bit better, or are they a team that kind of hovers, top 25, top 30? Certainly an NCAA tournament team, barring an absolute collapse, but still trying to figure out just where they belong. And with losing to Purdue, you probably think it's a little more of the latter. They fall to number 21 in the country in the latest AP poll. That feels about right, just given the fact that they just haven't played a lot of great competition. So, but on the flip side, I thought there were some things to take away from this game that were encouraging. One of them being the reemergence of Michael Tchaikovsky. Of course, he's dealt with the injuries. Thought he gave them some meaningful minutes. They knew they were going to need him against a team with the front court size of Purdue, and he was able to contribute. So that was an encouraging sign. If you take that as not a moral victory, but just an encouraging development moving forward. I think the one kind of theme that we've talked about with this team over the last few weeks with some of the injuries they've had and just the fact that they are so young is you continue to feel that they still haven't reached their ceiling. And even with Saturday's loss, I don't feel any differently about that. They lost to a good team. Game they should have won when you consider they were up by 12.
Well, they didn't shoot the ball well late. I mean, that was the story with the game they lost in Nebraska. It was the same story.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't the same kind. I mean, Nebraska, that was a collapse. I
Fair
think
enough.
Collapse would be strong in describing. They had a 12-point lead, but that was...
It was also a better basketball team they saw, too.
Yeah, they were playing a better team. That was still, 13 minutes left in the second half. I mean, they started really well to start the second half, and they just weren't able to sustain that. And they need to make more shots. They shot 32% from the field in the second half, and like I said, even with their free throw shooting, which they were 18 of 21 in the second half, I mean that's terrific. Just a hair under 86%. You have such a little margin for error when you're trying to win that way. It's incredibly difficult, and they just Turgeon said it best after the game. He said, look, I think we played well enough to win. It's just we need to make one or two more shots, or we needed to get a stop. And they weren't able to get the stop. And certainly Carson Edwards got to the line at the end, made the free throws, and that was a difference. So, you always look at the end result and try to come away with some sweeping conclusion. I don't think we learned anything new about this team, good or bad, other than just, okay, maybe they're not ready to crack the top 10 just yet. But they played a tough opponent. It was a close game, and they just came up a little bit short, and that's going to happen. It hasn't happened very often this year, but it's going to happen, especially when you're depending on as many young players as the Terps are.
Well, and in these games, like when you go up to Penn State, you're kind of expecting them to just win these games, right? Because they've been so good on the road. And look, that Purdue game, this is basketball, right? You lose, you've lost 2 games now in the last 2 months by a point.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to freak out about that, especially not in the regular season. It's never good to lose a game, but I think the level of expectation has risen dramatically. And even though they're 21st ranked, I mean, even at various points in the broadcast, or, how good are the Terps? What was the level of competition? Are they going to be able to hold their own? They're going to have a chance in 4 weeks to do that, right? They're going to get seeded. They're going to play in a tournament, and, we'll see how far they can progress. But as far as this Big Ten thing goes, I expect them to win most nights. I mean, we've been a turn through this thing now. I've watched Indiana. I've watched Michigan State. I've watched Michigan. I've watched most of the teams in this conference. Purdue notwithstanding, I take my chance with the Terps. I think they'll be playing in the finals in D.C. next month.
I mean, you certainly hope so. I mean, whenever you're having a tournament format, you never really know. But right now, I mean, Wisconsin's alone atop the Big Ten. Purdue, as we talked about, is a force. I think Northwestern is a team to keep an eye on, certainly. Michigan State's, they look very mediocre from a record standpoint. They're 14-9, 6-4 in the Big Ten, but that's a team that it's Tom Izzo. You never count them out. But there's a lot of mediocrity. I mean, Indiana, who was supposed to be the class of the conference, they've been really mediocre. Iowa's kind of hovering around 500. Minnesota has looked good at times and has looked not so good at times. Same with Michigan. Penn State, who the Terps have Tuesday night. That's a team that about a month ago was looking kind of interesting. Remember, they beat Michigan State at the Palestra, and they beat Minnesota after that. But now you look at them; they've lost 5 of their last 6, and their most recent being a home loss to Rutgers, who I think. Rutgers is better than they've been the last couple of years, but that's still a bad basketball team. So, this is a Penn State team, 12-12. Shep Garner's a good player. They have some talent, but this is a team that, based on how the Terps have played, and look, I don't expect Maryland to continue to go undefeated on the road. Right now they're best road record in the country, right there with Gonzaga, who's number 1 in the country, 6-0 on the road. So they're gonna lose a road game, but don't necessarily feel like it's going to be this one. I think more so you look at where they're going to be, some of these road games coming up at Northwestern, tricky one there. Certainly going to Wisconsin, playing in Madison, that's going to be a heck of a challenge for them. But, the way Penn State has trended and the way that Maryland has shown resiliency on their rare losses that they've had. They've been able to bounce back. As much as we panicked as far as what kind of impact that Nebraska collapse was going to have on them, they reel off a winning streak after that. So I don't expect them to have any lingering hangover here. They have to play well in State College, but if they do, I expect them to come away with a win because they are a better team than Penn State.
They are 20-3 as they head up to State College in the Bryce Jordan Center to rumble with the Lions this evening. And then, of course, Ohio State on Saturday at home. That's an ESPN game. That's a 4 o'clock tip. I think Luke will be in on that. And then tough trip out to Northwestern next week and another tough trip out to Wisconsin. So next week, a far harder week. Far-fetched to think that they're still going to have 3 losses 2 weeks from now, but certainly hanging in there as I head away. Luke, I want to turn us to the Orioles here for a minute as we get up on this, because I know we're going to be talking more about this as pitchers and catchers report. The Andino signing, this sort of rubbing around the edges. Andino's an interesting name, an interesting story, but I have a feeling there's going to be 3 or 4 more of these in the next week or two, right?
Yeah. I mean, they've already made signings like this. I mean, this is filling out your spring training your non-roster invitees. You want to have depth. I mean, certainly we know how the Orioles have profiled with their spring training road games. They're not bringing more than a couple meaningful players, and Buck Showalter's always walking that fine line as far as the rules of how many players, how many starters, quote unquote, that you bring.
Well, he doesn't think it does him any good, right?
Yeah,
Let's be honest.
And what good does it? If guys can get their work in Sarasota in the morning and just do it that way, what good is it having Adam Jones taking a 2 or 3 hour bus ride?
This
whatever.
Is not unusual, man. They were doing this with Sutcliffe and Brady Anderson and Ben McDonald and Cal Ripken back in my era. So
yeah. So I mean, it's much ado about nothing. I mean, look, I don't think as much as Robert Andino being back for spring training is a nice story. It'll make for a nice story the first few days of camp. I mean, everyone remembers Curse of the Andino and how that was kind of a symbolic
thing,
a symbolic on-field moment for this team turning it around. They knocked the Red Sox out. It was a great story, and he was a fan favorite. But this is also a guy that, since he was traded after the 2012 season, I think he's played in 42 games in the big leagues. I mean, he's been a bit player. He's bounced around a little bit, Seattle, Miami, and has spent a lot of time in the minor leagues. So I think this is just a case of they'll give him a look in spring. They'll give him a chance to play in a bunch of road spring training games, and maybe he'll carve out a role at a AAA Norfolk, or maybe he'll catch on somewhere else. But hard to expect, barring some injuries, barring something completely unforeseen. Not exactly expecting Robert Andino to be running down the orange carpet on opening day, but nonetheless, for an early February minor league signing, notable. To some degree anyway, just because a familiar face back in the fold.
You expect them to make the playoffs this year, Luke?
It's so tough at this point. I mean, expecting, it's tough because you always look at this team on paper and you always look at the flaws, and I expect them to be competitive. I don't expect them to have a losing record or anything like that. I think things would have to go extremely wrong for them to be in that boat, and we just look at where they've been over the last 5 years. So I expect them to outperform some of the projections that are out there every offseason that everyone gets up in arms about. But it's going to come down to the starting pitching. We know this team's going to have some flaws offensively, but they're going to hit a lot of home runs. They're going to go through stretches of time where they score a lot of runs. They're going to go through some stretches of time where they struggle, and you just hope it's not anything as prolonged, as pronounced as what they had after the All-Star break last year. Their bullpen's going to be outstanding. And to me, it's going to come down to, I think what you're going to get from Chris Tillman at this point. Him now being 5-6 years into being a consistent starting pitcher in this rotation and being their de facto ace. But the big question is going to be, does Kevin Gausman continue with what he did over the final 2 months into 2017 and be a little bit better? I like the fact that they settled his arbitration hearing and didn't go to a hearing. I think that's good business, and that's good psychology for a guy that you're hoping can become your ace. So it's going to come down to him and Dylan Bundy, the other big name we're going to talk about. Can he build on what he did when he first entered the starting rotation last year? Build a little stamina, maybe add the cutter back into the repertoire, and become a legitimate number 2, number 3 kind of guy for them. They do that. If they feel good about those 3, then you kind of piecework the rest of it. Can Jimenez give them a stretch of 12 good starts at some point? Can Miley give them a stretch of 10 or 11 really good starts? And can the rest of it not be disastrous? Can we avoid the 7.50 ERA Ubaldo? You can live with the guy who's got a 4.5 ERA.
Yeah, can we avoid our fifth starter, getting bounced in the third inning every other night?
Yeah, I mean,
right.
It doesn't have to be great. It's not going to be great, but can you avoid it being disastrous where you're not just losing games and then you're completely compromising your bullpen and you're having to get the Norfolk shuttle going big time? And that's a big question. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but that's probably a reasonable optimistic expectation. It's not being unrealistic. It's saying, okay, if this can go somewhat well, can those two be mediocre? They do that, with their bullpen, with their power potential, with their infield defense. The outfield defense we've talked about, that's going to be a question mark. There's no doubt, but they have enough going for them where I still like this team to be in wild card contention. I mean, it's tough to pick against the Red Sox at this point. I mean, let's just call a spade a spade. They won the division last year, and they added Chris Sale. I mean, that's, injuries can always change things with any club, but it's going to be tough to expect anyone to prevail but the Red Sox in this division. But as we saw last year when both wild cards came out of the East, I see no reason why the Orioles, can't be right there battling it out with Toronto, the Yankees, and looking at what might be in store in some of the two other divisions in the American League. I see the Orioles being in it in the end. Do I expect yes or no? I'll say no at this point, but that's not to say that they're not. I don't think they can. That I think they're unable to do it. I don't think that at all. I think this team has a very reasonable chance to be back in the postseason. But as is the case any year, some things are going to have to work out in their favor that we're not necessarily counting on right now.
He is Luke Jones. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at Baltimore Luke, as well as Luke at WNST.net. We were together in Houston all last week. Wow, what a week, right? Like, I was going through it over the weekend and, playing some best of and letting some stuff sort of fly on Monday. And, whether it was Crockett Gilmore, Brandon Williams, and Matt Burke and Torrey Smith. But, I felt like even like the Doug Flutie stuff and sort of the Baltimore stuff and even a lot of the writers like Doug Farrar we have never had on before, really felt like last week, and especially the anticipation of that game and the way the game played out and being really a legendary football game when it didn't settle as so much for me on the bus ride back from the stadium to downtown on Sunday night, but I think as legend will have it, of all the things we talked about Tom Brady doing last week and the things he had done, he hadn't done this. This was one that there was no box to check off for come back from 25-point deficit in the fourth quarter in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, we've talked about this. I mean, short of Frank Reich in the wild card game, there's no precedent for this. I mean, even just looking at, someone cited, I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but it's a very short list of comebacks, even in the regular season, of 25 points that came as late as this one did. I mean, this wasn't 25 points in the second quarter. I mean, I think back to the Ravens against the Cardinals. What was it, 5-6 years ago? They fell behind by 3 touchdowns in the first quarter or early in the second quarter, and you're thinking, oh my goodness, but there's still so much game left. I mean, this was late in the ball game when this happened. It really was historic. And look, I get it. People hate the Patriots in this town. I understand. There's plenty of reasons to hate the Patriots. Ranging from just jealousy because they're so darn good to the more questionable reasons as far as cheating and all of that. But just to witness what we were able to watch on Sunday night, I mean that was special. And I think as I've gotten older, I find myself hating teams and hating opponents far less. And if my team specifically isn't involved and I don't have a dog in the fight, I root for something special to happen. I root for history to be made. And this sports calendar year in general, we've seen plenty of that. But 25 down that far into the second half, I mean that's something special. And again, love them or hate them. I always, as I always say to you, they're Ric Flair. That you could say they're the dirtiest player in the game, but they're not a 16-time world champion like the Nature Boy was, but it feels like they're getting that way, and it just it doesn't feel like there's an end in sight. As crazy as that sounds, because Tom Brady's going to be 40 years old here very soon, it feels like it could go on, and we could be talking about them one or two more times here over the next few years as we're going to be at future Super Bowl sites. It's just really incredible, and as you let it sink in, you can talk about the shortcomings of the Falcons, and they absolutely collapsed. They choked, whatever you want to call it. But at the same time, New England had to do just about everything right to take advantage of some of those miscues from Atlanta, and they did it. And you have to tip your cap, whether you like to or not. That was something special, what we watched.
Time for Ozzie to get to work now, right? Like we talked about. Time to figure out this Brandon Williams thing and figure out these signings and figure out the holes. We'll be at the Combine in a couple of weeks. Luke and I will be getting together after the Terps game to talk once again later this week. We're heading into rock and roll territory next week, and then some best of the following week as my wife and I journey away. But Luke's got you covered for all things Caps and Terps and Wizards. You can just go to WNST.net. Our morning newspaper will be shipping to your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning, courtesy of our friends at Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. Last but never least, if there's any breaking news at all, you'll get it first on the WNST text service. That is brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Our London road trip on sale. We're putting together Nashville and Green Bay and Oakland and anything else we got going on in April when the NFL schedule comes out. You can always email me anywhere around the world, nasty at WNST.net. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and streaming live on Facebook Live, as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. Big thanks to everybody who stuck it out with us last week in Houston and were checking us out, and hope you're checking us out later on this week as we get ready for a little bit of downtime around here. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.